If you had just 1 year left to live, could your body already be trying to tell you? That question might send a chill down your spine. But let me share something with you. Many people, parents, grandparents, spouses, have quietly entered the final year of their lives without ever realizing it. And neither did their families. Not because they didn't care, but because the signs were too quiet. I'm talking about the smallest of changes. A pair of pants that suddenly fits loosely for no clear reason. An empty afternoon when your loved one no longer feels like talking the way they used to. One day, they forget the way home, even though that street has been their whole life. Have you ever noticed something like that? Death, especially for older adults, rarely arrives like a thunderclap. It doesn't come with drama, like in the movies. It creeps in like a mist, slow, silent. And only when we look back do we realize that the warnings were always there. In this video, I'll walk you through 5 powerful signs that often appear in the last 12 months of an older person's life. Not to frighten you, but to help you know when to be closer, when to hold their hand a little tighter, and when to prepare lovingly for the things modern life often pushes aside. I won't just list dry facts. Instead, I'll tell you 5 stories, 5 people, each with their own journey, and each one taught me a lesson I'll never forget. And if you're caring for someone you love, if you started sensing something feels not quite the same, this video might just be the guide you've been needing. Let's begin with Frank, a man who once stood tall and strong like an oak tree, but who, over just a few short months, grew thin, quieter, as if his life force was gently being drained away. And no one noticed until it was too late. Frank used to be the kind of man who made heads turn when he walked into a room. Tall, broad-shouldered, walking with the steady stride of someone who was born to carry the world on his back. At 79, he still drove his pickup truck to buy lumber, still mowed the lawn every weekend, and never let anyone see him weak. But then last summer, his daughter Linda began to notice something different. It started with his favorite jeans slipping slightly every time he stood up. Linda laughed and teased him, saying maybe he needed more burgers. But just a few weeks later, when he buttoned a dress shirt that used a strain at the collar, without effort, Linda froze. Her father was shrinking, faster than anyone could explain. Frank wasn't on a diet. He wasn't exercising heavily. He didn't complain about his health. But his clothes hung looser, his shoulders were narrower, and the one strong hand that held her as a child now looked bony, like they belonged to someone else. At meals, he ate less. Not too hungry, he'd say. Or, my stomach feels off. The family thought it was just age. What they didn't know was that Frank's body had already begun its quiet retreat. Unintentional weight loss in older adults is often brushed off, or mistaken for a normal part of aging. But in truth, it's one of the earliest and most telling signs that the body is entering its final stage. When an older person starts losing weight quickly despite normal routines, it often means the digestive system is slowing down, nutrient absorption is faltering, and muscle mass is quietly wasting away. Frank was no exception. His legs began to ache, and he no longer enjoyed walking around the yard. The stairs he once climbed without a second thought became obstacles. His appetite faded. Linda started making his favorite beef stew and bought nutrition shakes. But Frank would take just a few bites, then gently smile and say, "I'm full." Every time. Loss of appetite in the elderly isn't just about taste. It's the result of biological changes. As organs begin to slow, the sensation of hunger fades. Foods that once brought joy now feel heavy, even strange. And when they eat less, their energy drops, leading to even less appetite. It becomes a quiet, invisible spiral. Linda thought maybe her father was sad, or not exercising enough, or maybe needed more vitamins. But the truth was, his body didn't want more. It was conserving energy, like a lamp dimming itself slowly, not resisting, not complaining, just quietly retreating. What confused Linda most was how calm her father remained. No complaints, no talk of pain, nothing to alarm the family. But with each day, each week, he seemed smaller, not just in size, but in presence. He spoke more softly. He sat longer on the porch, just gazing into the distance, like the world was slowly drifting away from him, and he was okay with that. Many people assume that someone near death must be bedridden on machines or obviously sick. But in truth, many are still walking, still smiling, still trying to live normally, while their body is already quietly letting go. Just like Frank, the strong, dependable man slowly growing thinner, quieter, and no longer finding joy in the little things that once made him smile. Linda will never forget that one quiet afternoon. She brought him a warm glass of milk. He held it in his hands, but didn't drink, just stared out at the yard. The golden sunset lit up the lines on his weathered face. Then he turned to her, smiled softly, and said, "I'm not hungry, but I feel at peace." That was when Linda understood this wasn't something to fix. It was time to begin walking with him, not ahead of him. If you're seeing similar signs in someone you love, looser clothes, smaller portions, long silences, don't dismiss it. It might be the body's first whisper that is preparing to say goodbye. And after weight loss, another sign often appears not long after: deep fatigue. Not the kind of nap can fix, but a tiredness that comes from deep within. We'll see this next in the story of Margaret, a woman who once lit up every family gathering, but suddenly found herself too tired to even leave her bedroom. Margaret was the heartbeat of her family. She was the one who made every dinner brighter, the loudest laugh in every photo, the person everyone turned to for encouragement. At 82, she still took daily walks around the neighborhood, planted flowers by her front porch, and every Sunday she baked cinnamon rolls for her grandkids by hand. No one ever imagined someone like her could fade so quickly. But then it happened. There was no accident, no sudden illness, no scary diagnosis. Just one day, Margaret told her daughter she felt a bit tired and didn't feel up to going to church. The next week, she skipped the grocery store. Then she stopped tending her garden. Her famous cinnamon rolls? Never mentioned again. At first, the family thought she was just going through a slump. Maybe the weather, maybe age. But the truth wasn't that simple. Margaret wasn't just tired. She was exhausted. A kind of exhaustion that couldn't be explained, and certainly couldn't be fixed by a nap or a relaxing weekend. She began sleeping more during the day, woke up late in the morning, fell asleep in her armchair before noon. Even standing up from the couch became something she had to prepare herself for, taking a deep breath like she was about to climb a mountain. This type of fatigue is not just about being old or slow. It's one of the clearest and most serious signs that the body is reaching its final stages. When vital organs begin to slow down, the body starts saving its limited energy for only the most essential tasks, keeping the heart beating, the lungs working, the brain alive. Things that used to be simple, walking, cooking, even reading, now feel overwhelming. Every movement costs more than it used to. Margaret's daughter, Susan, tried everything to help. She bought her a massage chair, made chicken soup, even took her to her favorite park to lift her spirits. But Margaret only smiled and said, "Maybe another day." Over time, Susan realized her mother wasn't lazy. She wasn't giving up. She simply didn't have the strength. Fatigue in the final year of life is not laziness. It is deep, irreversible depletion. It stems from poor circulation, muscle weakness, a respiratory system that doesn't bring in enough oxygen, and a tired heart that's working harder than it should. Sometimes, Margaret would try to stand up and take a few steps, only to lean against the wall, breathless. The woman who once stood in the kitchen for 2 hours preparing dinner now needed to sit down after just fetching a glass of water. But perhaps even more painful than the physical exhaustion was how it affected her spirit. Margaret, the vibrant, funny, talkative soul, grew quieter than ever. She spoke less, shared less, avoided group conversations. Not because she didn't love her family, but because even listening to too many voices at once felt like too much. The noise overwhelmed her. The emotions were too heavy. One morning, Susan walked into her mother's room and found her sitting in silence, staring out the window. Outside, the rose garden was blooming, Margaret's pride and joy. But she didn't want to go out there. Didn't want to touch the petals she once cared for like her children. When Susan asked if she'd like to sit on the porch for a while, Margaret shook her head gently. "I just want to be still for a bit." When your loved one begins to pull back like this, not attending gatherings, not laughing, not fully present. It's not that they're depressed. It's that they are weakening in ways they can't control. And what they need isn't pressure. They need acceptance, gentle companionship. Susan had once tried to push her mother. You need to be happy. You should get up and go outside. Come on, try harder. But she learned not all silence is sadness. Sometimes people need to rest, to retreat quietly. And if that's their way of preparing, the best thing we can do is walk with them gently and without judgment. Margaret's final months were peaceful. She no longer walked far, no longer baked, no longer told stories. But every morning, Susan made tea and sat beside her. They didn't talk much. They just sat hand in hand. Sometimes that's all someone nearing the end needs. A presence without expectations. A love without conditions. If you've noticed your loved one becoming more tired than usual, withdrawing from things they once enjoyed, sleeping more, talking less, as if they are fading, don't rush to label it or fix it. It could be their body's way of quietly letting go. And once you learn to listen to that, you'll realize that sometimes it's not about trying to keep them here, but about making sure they feel safe, heard, and deeply loved on their way. Next, we move into a more delicate sign, not of the body, but of the mind. Confusion, forgetfulness, and moments of feeling lost in their own home. The story of Harold will show us how the mind, too, begins to say goodbye. Harold never forgot a single birthday in the family. Not ever. Even with 8 grandchildren, he remembered every date every month. He even knew which one loved strawberry cake and which one only ate chocolate. He had worked as a chief accountant for a local company, well known for his razor-sharp memory and precision with numbers. Even at 85, Harold played online chess every evening, solved the New York Times crossword every Sunday, and read the newspaper from the back page to the front. A quirky habit no one dared to question. So, when he asked his granddaughter's name, the same little girl he used to bike to school, the whole family fell silent. They thought he was joking, but his eyes didn't show humor. They looked confused, frightened, as if he, too, was scared of the question he just asked. And that wasn't the only time. The next week, Harold called his wife by the wrong name. The day after, he couldn't remember whether he'd had breakfast, even though the dishes were still on the table. Then one evening, he got lost in his own home. He opened the wrong cupboards, looked for the bathroom in the living room, and one night, he walked outside at midnight, thinking he was late for work. The family grew concerned, but the doctor said it might just be normal aging. Maybe that was true, but Susan, his daughter, felt something deeper was happening. It wasn't just forgetting names. It was like he was slowly fading. He no longer argued passionately about politics. He didn't react when his favorite football team lost. He became quiet, withdrawn, sometimes sitting for hours staring into space, as if his mind had gone somewhere far away. When an elderly person begins showing signs of cognitive decline, forgetting familiar names, losing their sense of place, repeating questions, struggling with simple tasks, it's often a sign that brain function is decreasing. It's not always Alzheimer's or dementia. Sometimes it's simply the brain receiving less oxygen, less blood flow, fewer nutrients. The mind slows gently, subtly, but what's most noticeable isn't just what they forget. It's how they begin to withdraw emotionally. Harold started speaking less. At family dinners, he sat at the table but didn't join conversations. When many people were talking, he would lower his head, overwhelmed. One day, during a family gathering, he quietly stood up and walked into his room, shutting the door. Not upset, not sad, just no longer able to keep up. Susan cried that night. She didn't understand how her father, one so sharp, so articulate, could feel so distant. But after speaking with a hospice care expert, she learned it wasn't a choice. It was part of the mind letting go. As the brain weakens, it affects more than memory. It touches emotions, orientation, even social connection. Elderly people may become irritable, anxious, afraid for no reason, or they may seem numb, as if nothing matters anymore, not because they stopped loving their family, but because their brain no longer processes those emotions the way it used to. One day, Harold sat quietly, staring at an old photo of his late wife. He looked at it for a long time, then turned to Susan and asked, "Where did your mother go today?" No panic, no sadness, just a soft question, one that cut deeply into Susan's heart. She gently replied, "She's in your heart, Dad. You know that." And Harold smiled, as if remembering something, then fell silent again. What hurts most isn't just the forgetting. It's when they no longer try to remember. When they don't ask about the weekend plans. When they stop showing excitement about the movie you were going to watch together. When their eyes meet yours, not with warmth but with distance. Like one foot is already in another world. For those caring for someone like Harold, the most important thing isn't to force them to come back. It's to meet them where they are. Speak gently. Avoid blaming or saying, "You already forgot?" Instead, just sit beside them. Hold their hand. Let them feel safe. Sometimes, a warm look means more than any words. Harold passed away in his sleep, a few months after the last time Susan saw him read a newspaper. She said the thing she cherished most wasn't trying to keep him as he used to be, but learning to love him for who he had become. If you're seeing changes in the way your loved one thinks, if their mind seems to drift, if they forget familiar faces or words, don't panic. Don't lose heart. Listen. Be present. Because even when memory fades, love remains. Next, we move to a more visible physical sign. Recurring infections, slow healing wounds, and a body that can no longer fight back. We'll meet Evelyn, the wife of a former soldier, who fought through everything in life until even her immune system had to surrender. Evelyn was the kind of woman people remembered after just one meeting. She wasn't loud. She didn't draw attention to herself. But she carried a quiet strength that made others want to stand taller, work harder, and live a little kinder. As the wife of a retired military man, Evelyn spent her life as a silent backbone behind her husband, Walter, who once served in the Middle East. Even through hard times, Evelyn never let others see her tired. She was the first awake each morning, the last to go to bed at night. Every pill for her husband, every wrinkle on a shirt, every speck of dust in the house. Nothing escaped her watchful eye. But within just a few months, Evelyn began landing in the hospital again and again, and for things that not long ago she would have handled with ease. It started with a cold, a lingering cough that hung around for a week, then two. Doctors thought it might just be seasonal flu, but Evelyn didn't get better. Then came a urinary tract infection, the first in years. She was hospitalized with a high fever. Despite taking all the right meds, her recovery was painfully slow. Weeks later, a small bruise on her knee from bumping a table refused to heal. It swelled, turned red, and eventually became infected. Another round of antibiotics. Walter, the same strong man who once ran into danger for others, now sat helpless beside her hospital bed, holding her hand, not understanding how the woman who never got sick had suddenly become so fragile. But the doctors were clear. Evelyn's immune system was failing. Her body, after so many years of carrying everyone else, was finally tired. Her white blood cells, those tiny fighters, weren't as sharp, weren't as quick. Her body no longer responded well to viruses or bacteria. Even the smallest scratch was now a risk. What's terrifying is that this process didn't happen overnight. It started quietly. A bruise that took too long to fade. A fever that lingered. A cough that wouldn't go away. But because people often think, that's just aging, they miss the warning signs. In truth, these are loud alarms, telling us the body is losing its ability to recover. Circulation slows. Organs weaken. Nutrients aren't absorbed like before. The immune system doesn't create enough fighters anymore. And so, what used to be minor illnesses now become serious. What once healed in days now lingers for weeks. Walter tried everything. Took her to specialists, tried vitamins, changed her diet. But after every recovery, Evelyn got sick again. Each time took longer. Each time left her a little weaker. One quiet evening, Evelyn sat by the window, holding the family photo album. She turned each page slowly, her hands trembling just slightly. Walter brought her a warm glass of water, rested his hand on her shoulder, and Evelyn whispered, "I'm not scared anymore. I'm just tired." Just 4 words. I'm just tired. But for Walter, they were a bell ringing deep inside. The woman who once carried the whole household had finally run out of strength. One of the hardest truths about the final year of life is realizing that the body no longer wants to fight, even when the spirit still does. Evelyn still loved her family. She still wanted to be there for her grandchildren. She still dreamed of decorating the house for Christmas. But every time she tried to rise, her body resisted. Every infection became a marathon. Every movement an effort. And sometimes the infections don't show up the way we expect. Elderly people may not get high fevers. Instead, they may just seem more tired, lose their appetite, or become slightly confused. Families may think it's memory loss, when in fact, it's an infection hiding in the body. That's why it's so important to notice the smallest changes, because they might be the body's final way of speaking up. Evelyn passed away on a crisp fall morning. No alarms, no panic, just quiet, the way she had lived her life. Walter sat beside her, holding her hand, and whispered, "You did more than anyone I've ever known. You can rest now." If you're caring for a parent, a grandparent, or a partner in their final years, and you notice they're getting sick more often, taking longer to heal, feeling weaker after even a cold, don't ignore it. It's not just part of aging. It may be the final message from a body preparing to say goodbye. And then as life begins to slow even more, there's one final unmistakable sign. Changes in breathing, circulation, the cooling of hands and feet, the pause between breaths. Next, we'll meet James, a former firefighter, once in control of every crisis. But in his final days, even his own body became something he could no longer command. James was always the first to run into a burning building. A firefighter for 32 years. He was no stranger to smoke chaos or cries for help in the middle of the night. To everyone around him, James was the embodiment of courage and calm. A man who never allowed himself to fall, no matter the circumstance. Even after retiring at 66, James kept a steady routine. He rose early every morning, took walks around the neighborhood with his German shepherd, Duke, and tended the garden with pride. He fixed whatever broke around the house, and regularly visited his old fire station to catch up with his crew. But by the time he turned 84, subtle changes began creeping in, slow, unclear, but enough to worry the people who loved him. It started with a faint wheezing sound when he lay down at night. Everyone thought it was just allergies or a cold. But then James began running out of breath just walking across the living room. From the couch to the porch, he'd have to stop midway, rest his hands on his knees, and gasp for air. One day, while talking to his son, James suddenly stopped mid-sentence. Not because he forgot what to say, but because he needed to breathe. His breathing became unpredictable, sometimes rapid, like he was hiking up a hill, sometimes so slow it scared the family, like his body forgot how to inhale. Doctors diagnosed him with mild heart failure. But what haunted the family most was how his breathing changed at night. He began sleeping with his mouth open, and strange sounds echoed from his lungs. Not quite snoring, but more like water bubbling in his chest. There were moments when he stopped breathing altogether for a few seconds, then suddenly gasped for air, waking everyone in the house. This, sadly, is common near the end of life. When major organs like the heart and lungs weaken, the body starts conserving its last bits of energy. Breathing, which once happened effortlessly, becomes erratic. One well-known pattern is Shane Stokes breathing, periods of rapid breaths followed by pauses, then gasping. For those who witness it, this type of breathing is unforgettable. It's the body's way of preparing for the end. At the same time, James's circulation began to falter. His hands and feet were often cold, especially in the early morning. His skin lost its warmth and color. One day, while massaging her father's feet, his daughter Laura noticed a bluish tint on his soles. Her heart sank. She knew something irreversible was happening. Poor circulation is a clear sign the heart is struggling. The body prioritizes its core, sending blood only to the most vital organs, the brain, heart, liver. Limbs and extremities are left behind. Fingers, toes, even the lips grow cold and pale. This is how the body slowly pulls back, shutting off non-essential areas in preparation to let go. James felt these changes, but he didn't talk about them. He was a firefighter. His courage never left him. But one night, as Laura sat by his bed, he took her hand and whispered, "There are things that, no matter how brave you've been, you just can't control." And I think, "I'm almost there." She said nothing, just nodded through quiet tears, holding his hand tighter. One of the hardest things for a family is realizing they can't protect their loved one from their own body. The strong breathing becomes labored. The loud laugh grows silent. The upright posture sags. Each breath becomes an effort. Each movement, a battle. The family didn't take James to the hospital again. They knew what he needed wasn't more wires, more machines, more medicine. He needed peace. A quiet room. A warm light. His daughter's hand in his. And Duke, his loyal dog, curled beside him, ears still alert to his master's breathing. James passed on a bright, sunny morning. There was no shouting, no chaos. Just one final breath, then stillness, like a door slowly and gently closing. When your loved one begins to breathe differently. Shallower breaths, long pauses, breathing through the mouth. When their hands and feet grow cold, and their skin looks pale or bluish. Know that these aren't just physical symptoms. They are the body's last messages. Its final way of saying, "I'm tired now. I'm almost done." And in those moments, what matters most isn't action. It's presence. The way you sit quietly beside them. The way your eyes stay calm when theirs begin to flutter. The warmth of your hand, reminding them they are not alone. Because in the end, it's not about how many medications were given or how often the vitals were checked. It's about how fully you were there, how deeply you loved, how gently you let them go. Now that we've walked through the 5 key signs that often show up in the final year of life, what happens next? What can we do when we recognize these signals? How do we walk this path with love, not just fear? Those answers await in the final chapter, where we gather all these stories into one truth, that what matters most in the end is love, listening to what the body can't say, and loving at the right time. When you sit quietly and look back on all the stories we've shared. Frank, whose jeans grew loose as his strength faded. Margaret, who gently let go of her cinnamon rolls and slipped into long, silent naps. Harold, who got lost in a house he knew by heart. Evelyn, who kept fighting but couldn't defeat the lingering cough. And James, once the rock in every crisis, slowly measuring each breath in the quiet of his final days. You begin to understand something. Death doesn't always come suddenly like we think. It doesn't always knock loudly. Sometimes it arrives like a whisper, a soft wave brushing the shore, again and again, until finally the tide slips away. It speaks through the body. In weight loss no one can explain. In exhaustion no rest can fix. In forgetfulness that feels like smoke slipping through your fingers. In illnesses that don't go away. And in breathing that slows until it sounds like music reaching its final note. No one wants to believe their loved one is in their final year. And yet, no one wants that final chapter to pass in confusion, in regret, or in silence. Because when you recognize these signs early, you don't just witness the end. You're given a chance to make it beautiful. You can sit beside them more often. You can ask to hear their favorite stories one more time. You can say thank you. You can say I'm sorry. You can say I love you. You can't stop the journey, but you can walk with them. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is sit beside someone who's leaving and simply say, I'm here. If you live with aging parents, grandparents, or a lifelong partner, don't wait for the dramatic moments. Don't dismiss the little changes. Watch more closely, listen more carefully, and love a little earlier, because your presence, your eyes, your hand holding theirs, might be the last thing they feel in this world. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. I know today's topic wasn't easy, but if you're still here listening to these words, then you have a beautiful heart. You have the courage to face what so many try to avoid. And that is something rare, something sacred. If this video spoke to you, I invite you to leave a comment below. I'm here. I'm learning how to love at the right time. I read every word. And I want you to know we are not alone in this journey. Please tap the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next video. We will continue to talk about things that truly matter, quiet things, honest things, meaningful things. I'll see you in the next video. And if someone is on your mind today, don't hesitate. Send that message. Walk across the room. Say, I love you, Mom. Or, I'm still here with you. Or maybe just, thank you for staying with me all this time. Because sometimes those words can stop the world for a moment and make that moment holy